blockchain in supply chain management. And I think this is where everyone is probably thinking that blockchain actually is going to be the most common as we kind of go through it, because supply chain management is actually really useful for processing all of the things you would do in blockchain. So the idea is to increase the overall efficiency of supply chains and create accurate identification, location, where it is, where it's at, what kind of environment it's been through, and it removes the paper trail, puts it into a digital trail, and then you can help prevent loss, monitor the quality of products while in production. So in other words, if you've got stuff you're producing for Chipotle, you make a bunch of Chipotle product, you take it and send it to the distributor puts it on a truck, and then from the truck to the Chipotle store, it never shows up. That's a data loss, that's a supply loss, and you need to then go back and talk to that truck driver about why is 50 pounds of Chipotle meat and 2 pounds of sour cream missing from the Chipotle delivery. And again, it really makes it harder to manipulate the data in the supply chain if you are tracking it and storing it in the block every time you turn around. It would make it really interesting for people to track how product gets lost or how product gets diverted or waylaid. It would be just interesting seeing where all this stuff goes. So there's some really big core technology areas, and there's a lot of technology areas for this. So transaction settlement, audits, tracking social responsibility, because there's a lot of companies that do a lot of green service, right? Whether it's greenwashing or actual social responsibility programs, they're there. Cost information, compliance violations or support, tariffs, automation, automated purchasing and planning, reducing human error, provenance, food safety, and then reducing counterfeits. So lots of places to go. Some of these are actually being solved out as individual things that we would want to do, especially for things like food safety and for transaction settlement. You'll see these being hived off and put into something else. You're seeing automation put into smart contracts for automated purchasing and planning, and then straightforward automation on top of it. And all of this is to reduce human error. So the transaction process of this is that there's a lot of time-consuming cross-border payments. So like right now, it's winter time when this video is being recorded, so most of our fruit and vegetables are coming from Central and South America and into the United States. Those are all cross-border payments. That poor farmer needs to be paid. All the people that move that product from Peru to the Washington State need to be paid. And there's so many different supply chains that what they're thinking is that just the waste on dollars alone is around $1.6 trillion in system-wide costs per annum. And that's a lot of money, right? Which all goes to show that efficiency in the financial flow of supply chain can really carry a tangible, sustainable reward, right? You really want to make sure your supply chain is as efficient as possible. Now, we do have a hitch in here. We are in an era of COVID, and we have boats hanging out off the coast because we can't do a lot of other things. There are other things that will impact how that whole supply chain efficiency thing is going to work. There are things outside the blockchain that are going to create bigger problems, like the availability of trucks. But you might be able to use the blockchain to make sure that everything is in place when it needs to be. If we know that the ship is coming in, we know that we need X amount of truckers, we know that we need X amount of distribution and crane time and everything else, the blockchain can help you automate and coordinate all of the other things that go along with getting that product off the boat and into the grocery store. So the good part about this is that if you're doing transactions in here, you can actually get your payments directly without third-party intervention, as long as that smart contract thing has been met. I ordered 100 bananas. I got 100 bananas. I'm going to pay for 100 bananas. We're good to go. Automatically and immediately updating ledgers. The farmer knows that their product made it to the endpoint. FDA now knows they have a chain of custody from farmer to grocery store. So there's a lot of neat things that can go in here with those updated ledgers, and both ends of a transaction can be updated simultaneously. Fewer intermediary fees, the relatively low cost of computing power, really neat stuff on the transaction side. Really neat process that can go along with this if we can do it, because if we can save some money, make our supply chain a little bit more efficient, then we're in good shape. Again, extraordinary times, extraordinary other things that are going along the way, right? And then there's some audit. So supply chain auditing is pretty big practice for business, right? If you've ever gone through a supply chain audit, they are amazingly detailed and in-depth. Now we can go ahead and streamline that. That's the nice part about it, is because we can create sustainability and savings by having clear systems for auditing that are absolutely necessary. We know that manufacturing people want to make sure that that there's no slave labor involved, there's no horrible conditions for the laborers involved. So you can actually go through and pull up all the things that you need to have from an automated process. If you wanted to make sure that your Foxconn employees are only working 40 hours a week and building whatever product it is that they're building, you can actually tie that straight into the blockchain. As people log in, they clock in to do a thing. As long as the clock in and clock out is accurate and not being manipulated, you've got some pretty good auditing power right there. You know exactly how long that person it takes to build a thing, right? You can actually effectively probe and examine the supply chain requirements as you go through. You can make sure, oh wait, why is this person doing 100 hours extra a week? What's going on here? And then figure out what's going on. Are they getting paid for it? Right, a combination of accessibility, transparency, and some anonymity. You could actually tie everything into, here's how it breaks out for Foxconn, and everyone gets a unique ID. You can do their jobs, just let them go do their thing, and then let the auditors go do their thing. And if they find something after surveying the blockchain for all the data, they can then come back and say, hey, we need more information. You can make more informed decisions about what suppliers to audit, where to focus those resources, and then what recommendations to make based on the findings. So audit becomes a lot more automatable. You can actually set it up as a series of rules that if you have someone that's out of scope, or you have a plant that's out of scope, or you have product that's out of scope, all of that can be set up as an alert, a warning, just an automated warning or alerting system inside of the blockchain for that. Then I like this one because tracking social responsibilities. A lot of customers have really just basically said, hey, we don't want our goods to be made by people who are exploited. We know it happens anyways, but we don't want to see it. We don't want to know that all of that whole process is taking place. And a lot of consumers, 86%, expect companies to act on social and environmental issues. So you need to make sure that you're meeting that whole thing in the process. So the people are willing to do their part, right? Where 81% of consumers are stating they will make personal sacrifices to address social and environmental issues. And I know I am one of those. I will vote with my checkbook. There are companies I will not shop for or will not shop at ever, because I don't like the way they do things, either environmentally or socially or something else. We just won't do it. So 66% of consumers and 73% of millennials are basically choosing brands that jive with their ethics. And this is a great way of proving that you are actually living up to that expectation of green social responsibility. So not so distant generational wealth transfer means brands would be wise to embrace this process. And again, you're going to cater to what's called the woke generation with new money. And as boomers die off and Z's, millennials, and everybody else comes into whatever's left over, it will be interesting seeing how industry changes. And if you've already got blockchain's ability to trace the product's progress along the supply chain, you can actually pull up that whole process and show to your consumers, hey, we're a sustainable brand. We're good to go. We actually live up to the things that we say we're going to live up to. Then the cool part, accurate cost information. So in other surveys, 39% of supply chain managers surveyed said that inadequate technology and software was a barrier to useful costing information. So 30% cited resistance from accounting and finance personnel in regard to changing systems. All right, so yeah, change is hard, right? So the need is real. One study found that 88% of organizations have substantial cost reduction goals, but only 17% are there. Considering the disconnect in data systems costs almost $223 billion a year, technology, and it could be blockchain, is going to be a big part of making sure that we're saving that kind of money. Because if you can bring that cost down, then you're doing good, right? You don't want to waste money. You don't need to have an over-reliance on external financial systems. So you really want to be able to automate as much of that global supply chain as possible, not just for payment, but for environmental and tracking and everything else that would go along with it. So each of these issues can be rectified through the adoption of blockchain technology, assuming that everyone's willing to embrace the change. And there are people in this market that are doing neat things that will work here for that supply chain. IBM, you've got others that are in there that are doing neat stuff. So a single shared record of costing information, cost data, tracking and tracing, boom, you're done. If you've got that, you're good to go. It would be really nice to have it because then you can make better decisions. And then shipping data accuracy. Right now, with all the ships hanging off the coast right now because of COVID and because of other issues along with employment and everything else, there's no overstating the direct impact that shipping accuracy and timeliness has on a brand. All right, if you're late, people get cranky. I don't want to have my product delayed. I want to get it when I ordered it. Even just watching what happens on Amazon when I order a thing and that credit card process taking 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 hours later, I will have forgotten I ordered something because I moved on to something else. And then all of a sudden my alert will go off, hey, transaction approved at Amazon Marketplace. 5 hours later, it's like, oh God, who spent what? Because I got distracted by something else. People who have stuff late get cranky. People that don't have an immediate experience get cranky. And if they don't have that, then your shipping data and accuracy is a big thing. So you really want to improve this. 90% of respondents said that real-time data access and better information on sharing systems are needed. It would be great knowing when something's actually done. So right now, if they tell me it's going to take 2 to 5 working days to prep for shipping a product, I'm going to want to know about that, and I'm going to want to know about it right away, and I'm going to want to know where it is, because if I bought something, I'm going to want it like soon, because I'm an American and we have these problems of instantaneous gratification. Shipping data accuracy helps you get to that, which means the consumer expectation is met, which means the blockchain as a shared decentralized ledger is just the person to do the work. Right? Uniform code of record keeping. I know exactly where my product is from the producer to the consumer. And that shipping data accuracy is a big part of that. Then compliance. Oh man, do we have a global compliance process that's painful? Right? You've got everything. Every country has its own compliance. There's very little global variation on a theme. There's very little global, really good compliance information. It's all over the place. You actually have a cobweb of regulation, not just American, but it's complex, it's painful, and it would be great if it was a smart contract in the blockchain. So the problem is violating any kind of trade compliance law can run millions of dollars and years in jail, and then additional penalties up to $250,000 per transaction. So the more data the supply chain managers have on hand, the easier it is to maintain compliance. And wouldn't it be great if you could just say, okay, here's my compliance accuracy and everything else. We're good to go. Here you go. Government oversight or wherever I need to go. So we could avoid those steep punitive costs for compliance violations, because everyone can investigate what the suppliers are doing and how they're doing it, from federal to state to corporate. If all that data is out there, it's really easy to make sure that everyone's being compliant with the whole process. So blockchain has precisely that interoperable record that we need to have to avoid massive fines for blowing out compliance, because compliance is a big one. And then there's what's called provenance, or the origin of goods. By the end of 2018, the closest stats I could find, only 17% of companies won't be considering or employing some level of supply chain automation. So in other words, supply chain automation is a big one. And that the origin of the goods is a really big deal. When you go and you buy a car, you'll see, origin of parts in Canada or Mexico, and then built in the United States, or built in Japan with a majority of parts made in the United States, depending on where you go. Wouldn't it be great if you could verify that all of your cobalt for rockets came from a good source, right? So that automation of making sure that stuff gets into the food chain, into that whole supply chain, the origin of the goods is clean. Whether art, food, pharmaceuticals, the tangible value of the origin of goods is undeniable, right? People, and this is interesting, in England, international consumers were prepared to pay 22% more for British-made goods. There are whole companies and stores in the United States that cater exactly to that. They will import British groceries, and then you can buy British groceries because they came from Britain, and you'll pay the markup for it because moving overseas and all the other things. It's a neat thing. That unusual provenance merits the ability to show that a celebrity once owned a thing, whether a piano or a desk or a jacket, can increase the value of an item by as much as 15%. All that stuff can be kept in the blockchain. Then there's counterfeit goods, health concerns, support for domestic brands. People buy things for a lot of different reasons. So that origin of goods becomes super important when making purchasing decisions along the way. Then there's human error. So we do make mistakes. Humans always make mistakes, whether it's an error in invoicing, other things happen. I make a typo, I put the decimal point in the wrong spot. And even a 2% error rate in an Excel spreadsheet can really throw off your marketing and everything else. So if you can decrease those human errors, if you have it as a smart contract, if you have something set up so you can go in and go out with your inventory and make sure that everything is not disrupted, you can actually minimize human error in the supply chain process. So the blockchain actually will really help reduce reliance on humans, and that will reduce the reliance on human error. So instead of automated transactions, record and data keeping, all of this stuff is just stored in the blockchain, and you can treat it as a big data project, honestly. And if you're treating it as a big data project, you can actually go back through an audit, check it, make sure that you're actually getting those costs saved from human error. Then there's food safety. I kind of like this one. There's a whole article on this one. We'll discuss food safety separately. But the big thing here is from producer to consumer, no one ever wants to get sick. So many foodborne illnesses are out there. We get a recall for Listeria or Salmonella almost weekly. And we need to find out where that product came from and make sure that no one dies from it, right? Because you can die from food poisoning. So the blockchain will actually help out because there's a latency in foodborne illnesses. So it makes it really hard to find out where a contaminated product came from. And then there are people that are not in the food safety regulations. So restaurants don't necessarily participate in food safety the same way that grocery stores do. Usually it would go to Walmart and recall the 35,000 pounds of beef, only to find out it went to Kroger and it went to Safeway and Wiggly Piggly. So again, all these things go together in terms of trying to tie everything together for that product from the producer to the consumer, and blockchain can really help with food safety. Automation. Automation is a big one, again, especially once you start bringing in smart contracts and how smart contracts work. A lot of people are really kind of not happy with where their supply chain transformation is going right now, but that 94% believes supply chain visibility tools are a driver of positive change. So executives are taking a look at this and going, dude, we need to make sure that we are more tightly integrated with our suppliers, everything is more automated, and that the connections are clear, right? That we understand how we interact with those suppliers and where that data comes from, how money is moved around, what kind of things can be hacked, and then greater speed of data movement. Now, velocity is going to be a problem with blockchain, but that can be solved. Right, so blockchain is probably going to be one of your more reliable, advanced, and secure means for automating a supply chain process, because you can actually limit that data through proof of work or proof of stake to whoever's really participating in the network, and making it harder for outsiders to come in and try to alter data or move data around. Doesn't mean it can't be done. You just want to make it harder for someone to hit that 51% solution. Then the other one is purchasing. I know a lot of companies do automated purchasing now, that they'll do automated inventory and tracking controls. And if you need to have on hand 3 boxes of chicken and you get down to 2, it will automatically order your 3rd box for you. And then that will be delivered the next day through your supply chain process. The cool part is that everyone gets paid almost instantaneously when it happens in the blockchain. And it's kind of neat that when you're doing your resource enterprise planning, when you're doing systems to provide greater supply chain visibility, the blockchain is really there in a lot of ways to make sure that this happens a lot quicker, a lot stronger, a lot faster. So counterfeits, and then this is probably one of the bigger ones. There is a huge counterfeit market, and it's not just Louis Vuitton or Gucci. It's chemo drugs, it's pharmaceuticals, it's cars, it's car parts, it's phones, it's everything that can be made can be counterfeited. And pirated goods, it's ugly. They're calling job loss, they're calling trillions of dollars at risk. And COVID has gone ahead and influenced people's shopping habits, so it's harder to have visibility into where that product actually came from. So U.S. Customs and Border Patrol having seized tens of thousands of counterfeit goods in 2016 alone that no human force can match it. The burden of vetting $11 billion worth of international goods coming into the U.S. every day is simply too big without automation. So the supply chain, the blockchain, can actually help here, because as long as everything is checked in and checked out and only authentic goods get into that supply chain, you're in good shape. It won't help you if the producer, the person making the product, is an authenticated producer, but they're kind of doing a low end cut rate kind of thing on the sly. But a blockchain in combination with end-to-end supplier logs from producer to consumer, workflow monitors, it will be harder to get the counterfeit goods into market. And in some cases, this may actually be a life-saving kind of thing. We know that there's been a huge increase in contaminated pharmaceuticals up here where I live in Washington State with fentanyl. So making sure that what we get in terms of our aspirin and our chemotherapy drugs and all the other drugs that are clean, it's important that counterfeit, especially on pharmaceuticals, and a producer to consumer viewpoint are actually really free of counterfeits. And then finally on this one, tariff and trade. I know there's been a lot of things here and there's a lot of stuff about how supply chain actually works. But tariff and trade, making sure you're paying your tariffs, making sure that trading is fair, making sure that you're not circumnavigating or circumventing what countries are setting up as tariff and trade. Really kind of gives governments a chance of making sure that they're actually getting the money that they want on taxation and that you're actually paying your taxes. You can actually do your due diligence and make sure that everything is done. There's no dumping. There's no anything else going on that needs to not happen. So tariff and trade can be monitored and tracked as long as you have a consumer to producer chain of blockchain technology, and making sure that everything's done in a mutually beneficial way. You can demonstrate the origin of your goods. Customer agencies could more easily verify information. Making sure that everything is on the up and up would probably save trillions of dollars every year just by making sure that everything in the supply chain is legit. So long lecture here, and I apologize for that. So in summary, though, blockchain is basically could revolutionize most ordinary supply chains. That's a given. A lot of tangible benefits, a lot of intangible benefits for just people, companies, governments, and everybody. By having clean supply chains would really make a difference. There's going to be some really interesting interoperability issues and ongoing challenges. There's a lot of people in this space, specifically IBM and others. So there's some competing ideas on what basic format should look like or what the work should look like, including data usage, privacy, cross-border movement of goods, and all the rest of it, without having a solid global viewpoint into this, or a regional or federal, state, or anything else. Supply chain is going to be a really interesting problem to solve for blockchain. It's doable. It is very doable. But we're missing a lot of legal framework. We're missing a lot of other components that would make this actually go. It's a wide open industry to go play around in, and something to go take a look at if you're planning on doing blockchain and you wanted to move not just into cryptocurrency, just revolutionizing the supply chain through blockchain would save trillions of dollars. All right, that's it for this lecture. I will see you in the next one.